I know who Luca'S monster is, and I'm going to show you in this video. As you know, Pixar is amazing at creating a shared universe, and that's just beautiful. Get ready, because you're definitely going to freak out with this new theory here on Cine Lovers. Let's go! Welcome to Cine Lovers! If you're a Pixar fan, you know they have a shared universe. Every movie is connected in some way, and every human child in this universe has a monster, and that monster works at Monsters Incorporated. To understand this theory better, you need to know that monsters have to scare as many kids as possible to generate energy for the city of Monstropolis. That's right, the more children screamed, the more energy the city had. Then, at the end of Monsters Incorporated, Sully realizes that a child's laughter is 10 times stronger than a scream. But that only happened later. What really matters in this theory are the scares and the screams. At the end of Luca, we see that he decides to live permanently on the surface with Julia and her mom. And of course, he had a bedroom where he slept, but we never get to see his room, and we don't see the door to his room either. As you know, monsters enter through doors to scare children. Those doors are simply the child's closet door. So if we never saw Luca'S, we wouldn't be able to look for one that matches his. But if we don't know what Luca'S door looks like, how can we figure out who his monster is? Well, let's analyze what Luca is afraid of. Why? Why do we need to know what Luca is afraid of? Because, as explained in Monsters University, the scare you deliver depends on the child's specific fear. You need a specific scare for a specific fear. Monsters are so smart that they only scare kids based on what actually terrifies them. That's why we see Mike studying non-stop to memorize different types of scares in Monsters University. By the way, leave a like, it's free, and this video totally deserves it. Now, back to Luca'S fears. He's afraid of going down to the depths of the ocean with his uncle. He's not afraid of his uncle himself, but of going deep underwater because it's dark, really dark, and lonely. That's why he loves the surface. It's open, full of light, full of colors, and the sun is shining. So, we can conclude that Luca is afraid of the dark. Keep that in mind. Now, you need to understand something else for us to figure out who Luca'S monster is. According to Pixar's theory, Monsters Incorporated takes place in a very, very distant future. But the doors they use to scare children are actually a form of time travel. Wait, what? Explain that better. Here's how it works. The human world and the monster world exist in the same universe, just in different time periods. While humans might be living in the year 2025, for example, monsters are living in the year 5000 or beyond. There's a huge time gap, but everything happens in parallel. These dates are just examples to help you understand, okay? If the monsters are in the year 5000 and humans are in 2025, monsters can only scare kids living in 2025. They can't go back to 2019 or 2020, for example. When the monsters reach the year 5001, since both worlds progress together, humans will be in 2026, and monsters won't be able to scare kids from 2025 anymore, only the ones from 2026. So, as 1 year passes in the human world, 1 year also passes in the monster world, even though they're in different time periods. Got it? We can confirm this from Monsters Incorporated itself. When Sully and Mike get banished to the Himalayas, the abominable snowman tells them it's a 3-day walk to the village. Sully panics because they need to get back as soon as possible.
It's at the bottom of the mountain. We're on a 3-day hike. 3 days? We need to get there now!
And this is exactly why, because time moves at the same rate in both the human and monster worlds. If they spend 3 days walking, 3 days will pass in the monster world too. As I said, Pixar's theory suggests that monsters exist in a very distant future. But when we see the children's files in this scene, we can see that they're scaring kids from the year 1999. Now pay attention, Pixar is on another level with this. If the monsters in that scene are scaring kids in 1999, then none of them could be Luca'S monster. Why? Because Luca takes place in the 1950s. That's a 49-year gap between Luca and the children being scared in Monsters Incorporated. Luca'S monster is someone who was scaring kids in the 1950s. And since both worlds progress in parallel, that means this monster is no longer working today. So, which monsters do we know that are older and were definitely scaring kids back in the 1950s? Well, the first monster that comes to mind is the dean from Monsters University. Sully, Dean Hardscrabble. And remember that Luca'S biggest fear was the dark? When we first meet her, look at what happens. She enters the room and closes all the curtains, leaving everything in complete darkness. Even the monsters get scared. But here's the thing, she's not Luca'S monster. Hardscrabble would have been scaring Luca every night, but eventually, Luca would have revealed himself to her, showing that he was actually a sea monster, hoping she'd stop scaring him. And she would have been terrified because she would have seen a human child transform into a monster right in front of her eyes. And in Monsters University, she specifically says that nothing has ever surprised her before.
No one has ever done before. You surprised me.
So it can't be her. Seeing Luca transform would have definitely shocked her and changed everything for her. But there's another monster who was definitely scaring kids in the 1950s, and that monster is Mr. Waternoose. Guys, Luca'S monster was Mr. Waternoose, and I'm going to prove it to you. I'm freaking out right now. Smash that like button because this video deserves it, and you know it. Mr. Waternoose inherited the company from his father, who had inherited it from his grandfather. In other words, he was the third generation of his family to run Monsters Incorporated.
James, this company has been in my family for 3 generations.
He's an older monster, which means he would have been scaring children in the 1950s. But you might be thinking, wait, wasn't Waternoose just the company's owner? He wasn't a scarer. Oh, but he was. In this conversation between Sully and Waternoose, it's very clear that Sully learned how to be a scarer from Waternoose. That means Waternoose was a scarer before becoming the company's CEO. And Sully even tells him that he learned from the best. Not only that, but Waternoose had a very specific scaring technique, which he also passed down to Sully.
Scarer, huh? I'll start out with the old Waternoose jump and growl.
It makes perfect sense. Waternoose's father wanted to leave the company in the hands of a great scarer to set an example. And that's exactly what happened. His son, better known as Mr. Waternoose, took over. I also figured out who Sid's monster is from Toy Story. After this video, click on this card and get ready to lose your mind. But not now. Watch this video first. Now, how do we connect Luca to Waternoose? Let's take a closer look at Mr. Waternoose himself. He was terrified of children no longer being afraid of monsters. He mentioned it several times. And as everyone knows, children's screams powered the monster world. Without their screams, his company could go bankrupt and the entire city would lose power. To prevent that from happening, he was even willing to kidnap children to keep the company alive.
I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die.
Another super important detail, he believed children were toxic. Waternoose convinced every monster that children were dangerous, toxic, and deadly. And because of that, everyone started believing that touching a child would kill them instantly. But the thing is, no one had actually tested that theory. It was only later that Sully realized, thanks to Boo, that it was all a lie. But why was this rumor spreading throughout the company? Why did Waternoose believe children were toxic? Because Luca revealed himself to him. Luca showed Mr. Waternoose that he was also a monster. My mind is about to explode. Waternoose had no idea what he was looking at. He saw a human child transforming into a monster right in front of his eyes, and it terrified him. Every night, Waternoose went to scare Luca, and at some point, Luca revealed himself. He showed Waternoose that he was a sea monster, hoping it would make him stop. And remember, Luca doesn't need to be fully submerged in water to transform. If any part of his body gets wet, that part instantly turns into a monster. We see this multiple times in Luca. Now imagine this, Waternoose is scaring Luca, and suddenly, Luca's arm or face transforms into his sea monster form. Waternoose freaked out. He had never seen anything like that before, and it traumatized him. That's why he started believing that children were toxic. And that explains why he was so desperate to keep the company from failing, because he thought all children were like Luca, capable of transforming into monsters at any moment. From that point on, he spread the belief that children were toxic. As the years passed, all the monsters became terrified of children. But now you might be thinking, wait, in Monsters University, which takes place before Monsters Incorporated, they were already saying that children were toxic. Yes! By that time, Waternoose was already the owner of Monsters Incorporated, and he had already seen Luca transform into a monster. And at the end of Monsters University, we even see Waternoose personally hiring Mike and Sully. And there's one more insane detail in this theory. Luca's last name is Paguro, which in Italian means hermit crab, a type of crab. And what is Mr. Waternoose? A crab! Coincidence? Definitely not.
Coincidence? I think not!
This is clearly a reference to Luca'S monster, Mr. Waternoose. If you love these Monsters Incorporated theories, you're going to lose your mind when you find out that Boo and Andy's mom are the same person. Click here to find out everything. But wait, does this mean Lucca is actually a monster like Waternoose? Does he have monster DNA? I'll tell you everything in this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video here on Cine Lovers.